Okay, so let me raise some issues I think are relevant. Now, first, it's clearly true that if I save all my income and I don't eat anything and I don't give any of it away and I have lots of children and I have one child, say, that one child will have gotten an enormous extra benefit from the fact that the parent can invest the money at R. That child will have an advantage over a wage earner who doesn't have any access to capital. It seems to me that in the 20th century, and a little bit in the 21st, first there's an increased access to capital by the general public in the form of retirement plans and stock put programs and low-priced opportunities to invest in equity, and particularly index mutual funds. And the real question, though, is why should I care? Tell me, let's talk philosophically. And by the way, the R you're talking about is risky, of course, the average rate. So it's not always true that the rich are able to just get this risk-free rate. It's not risk-free. But let's talk philosophically for a minute. Why should I? There are a lot of people who are wealthier than I am. A lot of them didn't earn it. Sam Walton, who founded Walmart, four of his either relatives or descendants are in the top 10 of the Forbes 400. They're four of the richest of the 10 richest Americans right now. Steve Jobs or his descendants, they're doing better than I am. They make a lot more. They have a lot more access to money than I do. Why? And there are people with less than I have. Why should I be concerned about that? In particular, do you see any role for the accumulation of capital to help people other than those who hold it? Is there any worry that your interest in reducing capital concentration could affect the growth rate? Because you don't seem to suggest any connection between the two. So there's a lot of questions there. Sorry, take a shot at it.
Oh yes, you've said so much. I don't know where to start. But let me make clear that I love capital accumulation, and I certainly don't want to reduce capital accumulation. The problem is the concentration. Okay, but so let me make very clear that inequality in itself is of course not a problem. Inequality can actually be useful for growth up to a point. The problem is when inequality of wealth and concentration of wealth gets too extreme, it is not useful anymore for growth, and it can even become bad because it leads to high perpetuation of inequality over time, so it can reduce social mobility, and it can also be bad for the working of our democratic institutions. So where is the tipping point? When is it that inequality becomes excessive? Well, I'm sorry to tell you that I don't have a mathematical formula for that, and all I have,
at least you're honest.
all we have collectively is historical evidence. And all I do in my work, is to try to put together a lot of historical evidence to see what we can learn about the location of the tipping point. So what can we learn about the location of the tipping point? Let me tell you a couple of things we can learn. First of all, the kind of extreme concentration of wealth that we had in every European country until World War I think was not useful. It was excessive. So at that time, and there was a lot more concentration than what we have today in Europe, and even more than what we have today in the US. Basically, there was almost no middle class. So the 90% of the wealth would belong to the top 10%. Now, was this useful for growth? There's very little evidence for this claim. If you look at the evidence we have, you have a huge reduction in concentration following World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, also following the public policies, universal education, the welfare state, progressive taxation that were adopted following these shocks. Now, was this bad for growth? No, this was not bad for growth. If anything, growth in the post-war period has been higher than what it has ever been. And even today, although it is not great, it is of the same order of magnitude, or actually better than what we had in the 19th century, early 20th century. And the reason is simply that the middle class, the fact that we have a significant share of wealth that does not belong to the top 10% and that belongs to a broad middle class that have access to wealth is certainly not bad for growth. So inequality, above a certain point is just not useful anymore. So I think, we don't want to return to this kind of extreme form of inequality. I think at some abstract philosophical level, everybody agrees that inequality is acceptable as long as it is in the common interest. As long as it benefits the whole of society through more innovation, more growth.